All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming and letting me chat with you today. Today we're going to talk about something that I hear a lot as a software provider in this space. How do we mitigate risk? And particularly, how do we mitigate the risk of deploying technology that we may not use to its fullest potential? And how do we reduce the cost associated with doing that? How can we make it so that there's a fallback strategy? All these things are questions I get every single day. And we work hard as software vendors, or we should work hard as software vendors to help you solve those problems. And so I'm going to go through in a short presentation today about how we've done this for 3 customers and how we recommend you should look at it for deployments in your own business. The ultimate goal here is to change your operations. But I'm sure some of you are on the operations side, some of you are on the IT side. If you're on the ops side, you say, I want to change things, I want to change to be more productive. On the IT side, they say, no, I don't want you to change the systems because it's stable and it works. And we agree with that, actually. There's a lot of reasons why that's not a terrible idea. But at the same time, you have to change. The world is changing. We all understand, that I think one of the previous panelists mentioned digital transformation. Exactly what does that mean? But in our guts, we all know that all the paper we keep is probably got to go it's got to go away somewhere. So how can we take that next step, and how can we do it in a way that allows us to leverage this very new technology in a way that is constructive and powerful for our operations without being disruptive? So first of all, my name is Seth Patin. I am the founder and CEO of LogistiVIEW and Exalogics. LogistiVIEW is a connected worker platform that improves the productivity and job satisfaction of frontline workers. We specialize in smart glasses, but we also support tablets, handheld devices, and really any other technological device that you can imagine that you would use in your operations. One thing about connected worker technology is it's not just smart glasses. A lot of people assume that it is. I'm also the founder of a company called Exalogics. Exalogics is one of the largest implementers of warehouse management software for JDA, if any of you have ever heard of the company JDA. And so I've spent my entire career in logistics and supply chain, specifically implementing large-scale warehouse management solutions. That's where LogistiVIEW came from, because I watched what information systems do today, and I'm going to talk about this more towards throughout the conversation. But information systems today are really good at storing data. But what I've observed over the course of my career, and what I'm guessing many of you have also observed, is that they're not the greatest at actually telling people what to do and how to do it. So we have this preponderance of data, and we're not particularly good at telling people how to do their job. And then we're disappointed when we give them poor instructions, and the rather predictable outcome is that they don't do exactly what we want them to do. So today I'm going to talk about what I see as a challenge in our industry. A challenge in really any human interface technology. Anything that's coming into an IT platform that already exists and ultimately is threatening to change things. That change threat, especially if it's too dramatic, can be very much of a shock to the system. So then we're going to talk a little bit about 3 ways that LogistiVIEW has integrated with existing information systems in a way that doesn't really require that paradigm to change substantially. And then also, we're going to talk a little bit about what I believe is the critical approach to wearable device integration, and ultimately really any next-gen connected worker platform device integration. So let's first talk about the shortfalls, because you guys talk to me about these problems all day. Not sure if any of you specifically have, but there's a lot of people who I talk to who say, I've been burned in the past. So, got message from software community. If you want AR, you'll need to change your systems. A lot in some cases. Now again, the operations people are going, well, that's not that hard. IT, get off their butts and do it. The IT people don't necessarily agree. I understand why. Why do we ask you to do this? Well, the answer is because technology changed. Truth is that the systems we use today can't talk to an AS400, or can they? We'll talk about that later. But we've built technology because, us technology providers built it with what's available today. Unfortunately, oftentimes that means we didn't really know what's available yesterday and what you already have in your environment. So we have to learn with you, which can often be a sometimes painful process. occasionally costly. So I hear a lot, AR and wearables is automatically disruptive. It's going to, it's going to be troublesome for me. We love the idea, but we just aren't sure we can handle the risk right now. I don't believe that is a good reason not to do something, but it is a compelling reason not to do something. So changing a system is risky, it's expensive, and it's a lot of work. I mean, how many of you have an IT bench of 15 really good developers just sitting waiting for you to, their beck and call? No one. It's just not the way the industry works. It's not the way any business works. But often IT is the blame. Hey, why don't you guys want to do this new integration? It's really, it seems like it's pretty easy. And look at all this operational efficiency it's going to gain us. And then there becomes this very difficult kind of give and take, push and shove around what approach do we use to actually get this technology into your environment while simultaneously not causing extensive chaos. Well, I'm here to say that it's not actually your job to figure this problem out. Really, it's mine, and it's the entire industry's. Software companies ought to be able to bring solutions to the table that help solve integration challenges. And so we ask the simple question, what if we were to meet every legacy system, your system, and everyone else's system, where they currently are, and really go back to leveraging the technologies that are already deployed, the investments that you've already made, in a way that is maybe not the most transformative possible, but it's substantially improvement, or it's a substantial improvement over what you have today. If you think about this, if you can achieve 20% improvement in an operation, most of us would consider that substantial. Now, granted, yes, there may be an option to get 50% improvement in a particular process, but it requires changing everything. Well, going after that 50% process might be a noble cause. Certainly there's ROI to be had, but the process of getting there may be so difficult and or impossible that in the end, it's just a lot of frustration for everyone involved. In the meantime, we left the 20% behind. One thing I can guarantee you is that not ever realizing a 50% ROI isn't as good as realizing a 20% ROI. And so, how can we change operations without changing IT? So, many of you have seen green screen backends. In fact, many of you probably work with them on a regular basis. Many of our customers, I would say over half of our customers, still have green screen backends, telnet-based backends. And what's interesting is they do not have 40-year-old software. To this day, IBM sells servers that run on the Telnet 5250 protocol for any of you IT people in here. Some of you are cringing, EBCDIC, ooh. But that's the reality of the world today. It's still common. And yet most of the software that we build, most of the software you can find out there, is not capable of talking with that kind of a system at all. So you can have, one of my customers has a brand new Manhattan WMS. They literally installed it 2 years ago. But it needs an integration approach that is capable of speaking with it versus having them build a whole new custom integration in their WMS. So we started talking to them about how that was possible. We had one dental supplies distributor that had an not ancient system, but a system that was not API-based. And APIs are kind of the universal programming interfaces for quote-unquote modern systems, and that goes back a long ways depending on what technology you use. But for them, they just weren't going to be able to program anything. But they really wanted the technology. They wanted the advantage, the operational efficiency, in this case, of being able to replace a paper-based system. They had no sequencing. They had no grouping. So in their warehouse, they had to take big stacks of paper, and many of you probably have similar processes in your facilities. Big stacks of paper, no optimization, and you hope that the person is going to take the right travel sequence. You hope that they will try and optimize mentally, but if you ever watch them on the floor, we all know that that's not a perfect that's not a perfect science. Even your best picker is going to go from that side of the building to that side of the building, back to that side of the building again, and in the meantime waste 6 minutes. That's the kind of stuff that we want to try and avoid. And a lot of times, if it's paper-based or it's telnet-based, You're stuck with what you think, or people believe they're stuck with what they have today. And that's not necessarily the case. We found in this case, this company was able to give us access to just pull a little bit of data out of their database. It was a completely read-only operation, so there was no risk to their data being messed up or anything like that. And it was enough to get us all the information we needed to completely resequence and reprioritize their picking process. And we were able to turn a paper process into a tablet-driven process that was remarkably more efficient in only a couple days worth of time. Incredibly simple to do because we didn't have to change anything. We have another customer, this one's a publicly available case study on our website, a company called Peter Millar. Peter Millar is a apparel retailer, and they wanted to implement a substantial new business process for e-commerce fulfillment. They have a system that is fairly modern, but they don't have a substantial amount of IT effort or IT folks to be able to modify it and control it. They like to try and make it as stable as possible. They had APIs already. So rather than telling them they had to change everything about their APIs or about the business logic behind them, we were able to connect with those APIs. Again, a different technology, first a database, now an API, and pull the data we needed, push the data that they needed back from us, and it looked a lot like they were talking to one of their RF guns. And we were able to, again, achieve the same process without the customer system didn't really know what we were doing. We were actually doing an augmented reality-driven put wall. So we built an augmented reality put wall. They didn't have to bolt anything to a shelf because they were wearing glasses. And we were able to make the WMS happy with the results by just telling it that, hey, now we're packing out this box. And in the meantime, we have done this complex operation to consolidate and kit the orders. Another customer, a medical device manufacturer, we had originally designed with their systems integrator a custom socket-based protocol. Some of you may know that name. So this is a fairly technical effort, and we thought that this is a good solution. The systems integrator they said, yeah, we're all good. 6 months later, we actually went live, and nothing worked. And the systems integrator comes back and says, oh, sorry. Turns out the spec we gave you isn't available in your version, it's in the next version. So they said, here, for $75,000, we'll upgrade your WCS. You can imagine that went over like a lead balloon. They've already paid for the system, they've already planned for the ROI, and now they find this news out. So instead, they said, we said, well, we can integrate with the same telnet session that your RF guns use. But we can change the behaviors on top of that so that you can actually have all the advantages that we had originally planned to have anyway, and we can confirm picks through the telnet session. Again, just like the RF guns they already use today. We went live with it, it was successful. So the de-risking approach is actually somewhat interesting here. We have multiple communication methods, multiple integration approaches, again, on us, not on the customer. And also, by doing this, we're actually creating scenarios where the wearable devices or the next-gen mobility devices can be deployed side by side with what you already have in your business. So it's not an either-or proposition. The fallback method is to just keep on doing everything you've been doing. So from an operational perspective, the risk profile is much lower because we're not changing everything about the operational process. We're adding a new piece to the operational process. At the same time, on the IT side, we're not changing everything about the IT system either. But we're using the same exact methodologies that are already in place in those systems. Operationally, when this process works, we achieve substantial improvement. But on the back end, it doesn't really feel that different. And that's the whole point. How can these devices interact? How can these devices feel native, feel comfortable to the environment in which you already live, so that instead of talking about the risk of this massive change, your conversation with your IT team, with your leadership, is instead about, hey, we can implement this in a way that is completely painless. It's going to cost a few bucks to do the integration or to do the software, but if it doesn't work the way we want it to, we can start small. And if it doesn't work the way we want it to, we're not out $500,000 worth of integration cost. So these are all challenges that, again, I'm actually pulling this from individual stories that I've heard from folks in the industry. Some of you may say, oh, you're just making this up. I promise I'm not. I had many people come to me and say, this experience I've had. This is the challenge I've had. These are this is the way that, that we were unable to overcome this objection. And therefore, our project didn't go where we wanted it to go. And sometimes that meant scrapping the project. Sometimes that meant not getting the full ROI out of the project. And sometimes, sometimes it was just substantial cost that was unexpected, therefore driving ROI from, 2 years to 10 years. So our approach is ubiquitous integration with fully configurable workflow. And I think this is really important, ubiquitous integration that's fully configurable. So we don't want to have monolithic code changes. And realistically, in software today, that shouldn't be necessary. So modernizing your mobility with the same back end. And this is where, I said earlier, we're going to get back to AS400s. One of the things that we've been able to do this year is deploy for a couple customers AS400 and Telnet integrated solutions. This means if you have a warehouse management solution, if you're running HighJump, if you're running JDA, if you're running Manhattan, if you're running one of the umpteen other 1,000 competitors, you probably have a Telnet interface connecting to your RF guns. That interface can be used with smart glasses now. If you are working on an AS400 and you think there's no way I can get modern mobility, it's just not possible. False. We can actually hit query screens in those systems and pull data almost as if we're pulling it out of a database, and then go into an execution screen and pass that data back into the system in the right way after the user has manipulated whatever it is that they needed to do. We actually went to a prospect earlier this year, and I asked the operations manager, what systems do you use today? I'm curious. And she tells me, we use Rex. I said, what's Rex? I've never heard of Rex. What vendor is that from? She says, no, it's as in T-Rex. It's a dinosaur. And I thought, wow, that's we were all laughing. It was pretty entertaining, really. I've never heard anyone describe their system that way. But in her mind, this was very real. And when we discussed what was possible, she thought this was amazing, because everyone who had ever talked to her said, you have to do it manually. And there's really no way to talk to modern mobility devices. There is a way. Also, files, database connections, web services, message queues, sockets. Any of you who are in IT probably know about all these terms. Anyone who's in operations probably works as hard as you can to never need to know these terms. But all of this stuff is possible with wearable devices. It's just you've got to find the right software solutions, and you've got to have the right vendor partner. The challenge is if you just start with the devices themselves all behave only in this new world environment. They're all running, you've got a HoloLens, or you've got Android, or you've got Magic Leap, or what have you. Every one of those devices needs a software layer, fairly substantial one actually, that your team needs to program, or you need to purchase from a software vendor to make it so that these integrations are possible. Because the devices themselves are designed for only today's world, not for yesterday or the day before. So ultimately, our approach is to make your systems talk to smart glasses, talk to tablets, talk to handheld, modern handheld Zebra computers, you name it. It doesn't really matter what device it is. But all the devices you think you probably can't actually work with on your systems, chances are you can. It just takes a little bit more software. And if you do it in a way that integrates those devices with what you already use today, you can get all the benefit of those devices. Or, again, very close to all the benefit of those devices without substantially changing anything. And at that point now, that deployment is gaining ROI. It's low risk, both operationally and from an IT perspective. Those reduced risks have a higher probability of achieving acceptance and adoption inside the company. And then you can start small or start early, however you want to describe it, and then grow based on the learnings that you have as you deploy the solution across your business. Big bangs are great in theory, but as I'm guessing most of us have experienced in the real world, if you try to change everything, it's almost always met with insurmountable pushback. So how can you change everything without changing anything? Well, dear enterprise user, with LogistiVIEW, you can change everything without changing anything. And truthfully, we're not the only software company in the world that does this either. Industry-wide, this is a trend. And so, as much as I definitely want you to use our technology, I also want you to adopt wearable technology. I want you to adopt next-generation tablets, Android devices, Magic Leap, HoloLens, the whole suite of things, because ultimately, our workforces deserve it. Our workforces deserve that type of technology, and honestly, our pocketbooks also deserve the ROI that type of technology can bring. So, in summary here, you can deploy AR and wearables without a high risk of change. That change risk can be mitigated. We can de-risk the deployment by meeting your systems where they are. So whatever it is you do today, talk about that and focus on that, and then we'll change things down the road when it's obvious that that's a good idea. Terminal integrations especially is a fairly new avenue for this type of technology. We've just built this in the last year. Terminal emulation is a critical factor for integrating old and or text-only based systems that are still very common in business today. You can get wearables with a Telnet-based system, with an AS400-based system, and still achieve a substantial ROI. And ultimately, you can change everything about your business process without really changing anything about the risk profile in your operations. And I encourage you, as you go out into the world deciding what projects you want to tackle, look at it through this lens, and if you find the right software partners, the right hardware partners, and the right approach, then there's a very high probability you'll achieve success in your deployments. So with that, I'd love to take any questions you might have, and I don't know how much time we have left here, but looks like about 15 minutes. And I'll also be at booth 407 the rest of the day, and would love to chat with any of you, or if you want to try our technology out in person, we welcome you to come by. Thanks for your time. Yes, sir. Typically, our integrations are live, real-time with the information systems over which we sit. So if you have an inventory management system or a ERP or an MES, or depending on where your operations are focused, we can take data in real time, whatever that most up-to-date view of inventory is, the information systems typically know. And then we also confirm back completion of transactions to those information systems, just like your existing technology would. And so as that interchange takes place, the information systems are up to date, almost as if they were, exactly as if they were being connected with, just like your RF devices do, or a green screen terminal would. So in many cases, actually, I've seen companies that hold off manually keying receipt confirmations or shipment confirmations or something like that into an AS400-based system until maybe batch process at the end of a day. We can actually be more real time than that because we have the ability to connect to it directly from the directly from the platform. Does that answer the question generally? Yes. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for your time.